Well, friends, it's a pleasure to say hello from sunny Adelaide in South Australia. Today, something very special for you. I've caught up with developer Martin Ayles, a man who I've learned a lot from over the last 10 years about investing and developing in particular. Today, we're going to interview Marty and we're going to hear how he's evolved as an investor over the last 10 years and also look at a range of properties he's got on the market. And as we look at the properties that he's developed over the years, a couple that we happened to see as we drove by. It's going to be an amazing experience, and I'm pleased to be able to bring it to you today. Take me back, Marty, to the beginning. What were you doing before you made your first foray into property investing?
Before I started developing, I was a sales rep. We sold products into supermarkets. And then before that I was in the supermarket industry, pretty much as a bit of a, I suppose you'd call me a front end or assistant manager type role, and did that for quite a few years.
Were you good at school?
No, I was terrible. Yeah, I found school challenging. I was not too interested in being there.
Do you ever run into people who you went to school with?
From time to time, not too often obviously, but occasionally I do, but no, it's certainly a past that I haven't relived too much.
How do you describe to people what you do?
That's a good question. It's quite diverse what we do. As you know, we're our own builders, so we do our own construction. And you know some of the guys that work with me. And so we have a bit of a diverse business in the sense that sometimes we buy the land, do the construction and sell. Sometimes we buy the land, do the construction and rent, half-half. And then I have some people that work for me, as you know, that like building supervisors that manage the construction for us as well. And then we also do the other side of it, which is the subdivision and the development specific stuff with relation to land division and that type of thing. So the job roles are quite different. There's administration, and then there's practical building, and then there's obviously the sales and marketing and that side, and sort of we end up involved in all areas.
If I had have sat you down at the start and said you're a man who's going to build a couple of hundred homes, make a literal fortune out of real estate, what would you have said to me?
I think my direct answer would be that I probably wouldn't have believed that I would have come this far for this long. I think one thing I probably am proud of is the fact that I've always derived my income from property and have now done it for some 12 odd years or whatever it's been. I think I'm aware of the fact that there's economically times have been good. About 3 years ago, I made a decision that I really needed to sharpen my skills in the areas of working out how to be profitable in a tightening market and things like that. I was fairly aware that those things were coming. But yeah, I guess I think I'm grateful for the fact that I've managed to outperform the market and the market changes for this duration of time.
It wasn't always Martin Ayles, developer extraordinaire. We all start with a first deal. Tell me about your first deal.
Yep, my first deal was my first property I ever purchased was actually a rental property, which was $56,000 out in Elizabeth East in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. And that was rented at the time for $130 a week. And then my first renovation, I did do a couple of very minor renovations, but my first real renovation to buy and flip it as such and sell it was just near the airport in a suburb called Richmond. And then my first development was in Lincoln Avenue at Sturt. So I sort of ended up buying the rental properties and thinking, hey, maybe there's a quicker way I could make money rather than waiting for growth, and moved to the renovations, and then thought, gee, this is too hard physically and mentally, it was quite tiring, and then moved into the developing where I could sort of hand over the hands-on building work and just manage it from an administration point of view.
Marty, what's the story?
Well, Steve, today we're out the front of the first Martin Ayles development. The story behind this was there was an agent. His name was Steve Jackson. He's
Must have been a legend.
Adelaide real estate agent. Actually, he's still in business, I believe, just around the corner. And Steve actually rang me up and said, I've got a property for you to renovate. Come and have a look at it. So I came and had a look at this property, and here we are today. It didn't quite turn out to be the renovation we thought.
Well, Marty, what used to be here?
Steve, there was a fibro home, which if you look down the street, you'll notice there's quite a few other fibro asbestos homes. And this house here was an old blue asbestos box, and it's situated on just under 800 square metres of land. There's been some changes in the development policy, and now we'd probably actually squeeze 3 on this site. But in the heyday, before the pre-boom era that we talk about now, that we're getting on, this was all the rage. So these are 3-bedroom, 2 living areas, 2 toilets, 2-way bathroom, still rented to this day. These just under $400 a week rent, so $390 and $395. Mate, they're great homes, not perhaps the ideal choice of colours. Our build method these days is a little bit different, and at the end of the day, mate, trusty old rental properties, can't go wrong.
Tell me, Marty, can you remember when you bought it? What year?
2002 I bought this property.
Righto, and as your first development, tell me about the mindset going in. Did you know you were going to end up with this product, or how did you know what to build and how to build? And
yeah, sure. I was fortunate enough that I actually met through a real estate agent, a builder who was quite a confident developer, and he was quite a good hands-on builder as well. And he had quite a lot of experience, so he allowed me to use a floor plan of his that he'd already done just around the corner.
Yep.
And he had a fair bit of experience with the real estate agent in conjunction of getting these things sold. So we had a fairly good idea of sale price and build cost and those sorts of things. So the numbers when I did this development weren't too difficult to work out.
I noticed, Marty, it's on what you call the low side of the street.
Yep. And Steve, I guess I'm tying that back into the product of the development checklist that I wrote going back a few years. And the low side of the street always does represent a few problems. It's what's called a positive feed water system here. We've got to get the water back out to the street table from the stormwater. It's created a lot of issues with me over the years for construction, with having the site stay wet, this site included in that as one of the ones with the issues. And I always believe that these sites end up with retaining walls and fences, which you'll see a little later when we go out to the back perhaps. And so if you can get high side of the road, it's just one of those little cost-saving things that I try and teach.
All right. Marty, what advice would you give yourself with the benefit of 10 years experience starting again and looking at this site? What would you change?
Well, Steve, what it comes back to is essentially what's going to give you the best return for you, not only your financial outlay, but perhaps also your time. So they're the 2 commodities, I suppose, that are involved in investing. And perhaps now you would look at maybe your density and the type of buyer or the type of tenant. So to give you an example, a 2-bedroom home, 50 square metres smaller than this, would only probably get $15 to $20 a week less rent. But the build cost would be probably around $40,000 or $50,000 per dwelling less, which you could average out at roughly now in current time around $1,150 a square metre to construct a moderate standard sort of dwelling. So now what I would say that we would change is the density. So in other words, this site would have 3 on it, not 2.
Marty, I noticed these are single stories, pretty compact garages, and I must say pretty compact dwellings. Would you go with double stories now, or maybe not?
Look, I've done a mix of both, Steve, over my years of developing, and still to this day we're doing some double story stuff. Double story traditionally is more expensive, and a conventional double story home is far greater build costs, so you're up around that $1,400 square metre mark, and you end up with perhaps a greater density, but then you also end up with a higher build cost. But it doesn't actually change that sale price or that rent figure. Now, there's really only 2 things, as you know, as an investor, that you can do with property. You can either sell it or rent it to make money. So I just don't understand, if you can build single story versus double story, if you're involved in residential building, the only reason you go double story is when the financial return from the greater density outweighs single story.
Got 2 more questions for you before we're lucky enough today we can actually get in and have a look, because you've got a painter here, the tenant's moved out, so you're repainting.
Old Steve, the painter, believe it or not.
Another legend, his name's Steve. First question is, what's with the deer in the front yard here?
I have to say I cannot actually answer that question.
Is that a thing you put with all your properties?
No,
or,
no, that's a tenant requirement, I'd suggest.
Righto, no worries. Bambi's there in the front yard.
Yeah, that's it.
And Marty, across the street here, looks like someone else has picked up on the idea of developing.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Okay, this area is what you'd call rife. So it's rife for development, this area. Every mum and dad, every builder, the government, there's some trust housing that's been built through this area. There's some old trust housing around here. And so this area, because of the nature of it being inundated with those 1960s and 70s fibro homes, most of the allotments are 800 square metres plus. So there's just a lot of development opportunity.
All right, what are they building across the road?
That looks like 3 dwellings, Steve. I'd say that's probably 3 two-bedders, single story going over there.
All right, very good. Let's go inside. Righto, Marty, give me the tour.
Welcome, Steve. Welcome to the old floor plan, the old product. Haven't built one of these for a while. So you notice this is 9-foot ceilings, which we don't do anymore, cost savings. It's got a formal lounge at the front here, which we wouldn't do anymore either.
Because?
Just cost and look, at the end of the day, famous Steve McKnight once taught me that investing is about making money, and you just don't get paid any extra for that in the form of sale or rental. So valuation, nothing. It just won't do anything for you. So some of the oldies like it, senior people, sorry, we have to call them these days. But it doesn't represent a return on your money really fundamentally for what it costs you. So at the end of the day, as we said earlier, you know, you're talking $1,150 odd a square metre now to build. So that there is 4 by 5 roughly, so it's pretty close to 20 square metres. So that's going to cost you $20,000 over the whole project.
These days, for this space, what would you do with it instead of having it as a lounge room?
You simply decrease the size of the dwellings that you build, and then, as we said earlier, that you would go for density. So you would try and get 3 dwellings on this allotment instead of 2.
Wouldn't make this into another bedroom?
Well, the floor plan would change. I mean, so yes, this would become perhaps a 2nd bedroom or a 3rd bedroom. This house is already 3 bedrooms, so 3 bedrooms plus a formal lounge plus a casual living area. So it's quite a big. These are probably up around the 160, 170 square metres, these dwellings, whereas now we're building them back around 100.
So what you're saying is, for the build cost and the area, putting this in here is more of a luxury.
Correct.
Than a money maker.
Which you won't get paid for. That's correct. So you just simply wouldn't do that.
All right, let's keep going. Let's see what's out the back here. Marty, walking up the long passage here, it looks like it's bedroom alley. So what do we got?
Got 3 bedrooms here, Steve. So there's 2nd and 3rd bedroom, and then the master bedroom on your right with a robe.
Don't look particularly big?
No, about 3.5 metres by 3 metres.
Would you fit a queen size bed in here?
Yep.
All right, very good. Storage?
No, not in the old days, mate. We didn't do that.
Didn't do storage in the old days? Is that something you do now?
Yes.
All right, so this is the master bedroom.
Yep. Here we are, built-in robe. Obviously, as you can see, it's a bigger room. This block, you'll notice, Steve's fairly narrow. Everything feels quite narrow. It's only about 18 metres of width, so we try and get around 20 now. So, and then obviously, rather than building an ensuite, it's got a 2-way bathroom, which is relatively common. But back in the day, it was not done a lot, and this is what we call the 3-way. So it's got the vanity, the 2nd toilet, and obviously the bathroom straight off the master bedroom.
All right, let's go through the bathroom then. So we have shower, separate bath.
Yep.
Righto.
Yep, and we still put baths in them today. So one of the 2 toilets.
Toilet 1, toilet 2.
Toilet 2. And then obviously a 2nd toilet. And a vanity, obviously, with a built-in linen press here for storage.
All right. Kitchen, living.
Living, yep. Open plan living, Steve, which is fairly common these days. Horrendous. I mean horrendous colour choice. And something, well, perhaps maybe not that offensive, but certainly something we don't do anymore. Practical, but not my favourite choice. It was called Beechwood, I think, from memory. We did that I reckon I would have done that in at least 20 or 30 homes over the years. And as you can see, carpeted now, we tend to tile them, just hygiene and easy for rental properties and things like that. So vertical blinds, as you can see, the painters here painting this whole place one colour, which is the famous parchment, which we do in most of the properties these days. So pretty much anything we build or rent is parchment.
Sounds like we're learning as we're going here, going back 10 years in time, looking at things going, oh, why on earth did I do that?
Yep.
One thing that I see here is that there is massive space in this part of the house, but the bedrooms, in my opinion, are quite small and pokey. And then at the far end of the house, we've got the lounge room. And so we've sort of got polar opposite living rooms. So it seems like modern floor plans nowadays aren't like that anymore.
Yeah, look, I mean, it'd be hard to think that there would be evolution in building in, say, 10 years or 12 years or whatever. Just looking at this house, even though I'm obviously familiar with this home and it's rented and whatnot, you know, the air conditioning isn't ducted. The back room is carpeted, the hallway is carpeted. The hallway is actually narrower than what we construct now. It's only 900 millimetres wide. The timber work, the skirtings and architraves are all Meranti, that's unpainted. And it's just stuff that we don't do anymore. So, and the kitchen colours obviously, the tiling's acceptable, but there's quite a few things here that we just don't do anymore that we've learned over the years. There's other ways we can make them perhaps not just more appealing, because it's not always just about appeal, but obviously cost efficiencies as well. But also, one mistake that a lot of investors I've seen, and developers particularly, because that's what we're talking about as such, they make is that they don't sometimes see value in spending that little extra, say for ducted air conditioning, to not always even obtain a greater sale price, but to at least obtain a sale. So sometimes it can be the difference between something selling and something not selling.
The backyard, Marty, looks like there's a fair bit of space out there, and I noticed that half of it's tan bark. Yep.
So obviously, Steve, being rental properties, and when these were built, the intention is to try and obviously keep the maintenance to a minimum. So obviously we try and keep the lawn size down, and obviously, as you can see there, we've cut it in half. And I mean, I think that's fairly common knowledge with any investor these days, is go for something low maintenance and affordable with the landscaping and rocks, bark, mulch, bit of weed mat to keep the weeds away and things like that. So the thing that's lacking here is probably some sort of outdoor entertaining type area. All the properties, pretty much from this one onwards that I built, from early 2000 onwards, have had all the paving taken out about 4 or 5 metres, and then quite a lot of them of late have had either shade sails or under main roof living entertaining outside built into them.
A point you made earlier was about density. Mm-hmm. And the idea that maybe this house is a bit big,
yep,
for the sake of putting another one out the back.
Yep.
And as I look at the back here and look at this space, which with respect, that tan bark is really dead space.
Yes.
Because no one's going to go on to stand out in the tan bark.
Correct.
It adds a bit of greenery, but
yep,
it really brings home your point about making better use of space for the sake of density.
Well, as you know here, Steve, we're on a duplex, so there's 2 properties here. And if you were to take the combined area of those 2 backyards, you've probably got yourself around 15 by 20, so there's probably close to 300 square metres of area, which you could very easily in this day and age fit another dwelling on. The council policy has changed, I think, at least twice in that 10-year period as to what you can and can't do. And so now with that change in that density, then we'll be looking to increase that.
Any regrets in building this?
No, not at all. I mean, hey, if you regretted everything you did in this industry, you'd be living a life full of them. So it's just about learning and evolving. And you know, I'm sure that there's people out there that sold a house on Sydney Harbour waterfront in 1975, and I mean, what do? Do you go through life regretting everything you've done? And you can't do that. So no, it's just about learning. And as you know, I've been doing this for a long time, well, a relatively long time now, and it's something that I've managed to make sustainable through changing with the market. And so really that learning process is really about changing your product, changing your business plan, and changing your outcome of what you're producing to meet the market, so you can continue to be profitable.
I think it's an important point that Marty makes here, and that's that your first deal doesn't necessarily have to be your best deal, and you're going to learn things as you go along. So don't be afraid to make a mistake, but do your numbers carefully so you at least make a profit. Marty, if you still own next door, and
yep,
I know you don't,
yep,
but if you still own next door, even though you built this 10 years ago,
yep,
would you consider bowling it over now and building back 4?
No, because your financial return wouldn't be there, because the sale price of that, even if it was a great value bargain buy, still wouldn't constitute value. You'd need to buy this whole site for, you know, $400,000, which would be $200,000 a home, which just wouldn't happen in this market. So these homes are probably worth somewhere around $380,000 to $400,000 as they stand at the moment.
Righto. And you're renting this for?
These are currently rented, or was rented right up until obviously a couple of weeks ago, for $390 a week.
And by painting it, you're just going to...
This is the 5-year rental maintenance program. So this carpet's actually all coming out. The painting's getting done. We had some stuff done to the gardens, tidied up. So this is just 5-year annual maintenance. 5-year maintenance. So
Single garage?
yeah, these are single garage. Yep.
And I notice that more so in your later developing, you tried to put the laundry in the garage.
Yep, we do that on most of them. We'll see some others that we've done that in. And yeah, we do.
Marty, thanks for showing us inside. Before we go, I just want to do a little exercise with you that I do when I look at properties, and unfortunately the guys watching this aren't here with us, so we'll have to take them through it. What I like to do is look at a house, look up, look down, look left, look right, and look behind.
Yep.
And I'd love to do it with you just to grab your eyes, imagining that you didn't own this, but just to get a feel of what's going on for this house and what's in the area.
Right.
So first of all, looking at the property, just describe what we see.
Okay, Steve, well, if we're going to look up first, we can see tiled roof.
Yep.
Which is a good thing, looks in good condition. If we look down, we can see a paved driveway, which has just had a little bit of love. I know that as a sneaky secret, but assume we didn't know that. You know, you're going to have some maintenance issues there. If we look left, we've got some nice new homes. I can tell you from experience that they're actually probably trust homes from the government. So you may end up with potential tenant issues down the track. If we look right, we've got some really nice, good-looking, attractive homes that are being built.
Yep.
So one would assume they're owner-occupied, and as we can see from behind, we've got a new development going up. So it's probably going to end up with a better streetscape and a better appeal to the street than what it currently has.
Okay, so if I do the same exercise, when I look straight in front, the first thing I see is a duplex.
Correct.
All right, so I'm thinking, right, obviously there is a site here that can be developed.
Yep.
As I look to the left, I see a duplex.
Correct.
So I'm thinking, right, the area is supporting duplexes.
Yes.
As I look to the right,
Another pair.
a pair, but not a common wall from what I can see here. It might have, but I'd have to go and have a look
Yep.
there. But if we've got 3 duplexes in a row, then yeah, that backs up the argument that there's development going on in the area. I then look up, and here I look up, and yes, you've identified that it's single story, but I also see a power line.
Yep.
Now, I don't think this is necessarily going to cause much of a problem in terms of access in here.
Correct.
But what is it that we don't see? Don't see any significant trees in this particular site.
No.
Looking down, I notice there's a sewer vent here.
Yep.
Is that a problem?
No, not a problem at all.
Righto. And then as I look across the road, I see, yep, a development site directly across. I see another duplex.
Yep.
To the right behind, and then I see a block of what looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units.
Some 1980s units.
1980s specials.
And they're probably government trust units, just looking at those briefly, I can tell you they pretty much are.
So little perspective here is that when you look at an area, don't just look at the house you're looking at, gain a perspective of where this house sits in relation to the others going on around it. Pay particular attention for what you see and also what you don't see. Someone who is starting today and looking to emulate a result in terms of becoming financially free through real estate.
Yep.
Would you say what you have been able to do is replicable?
Yes, it is, with a level of time put into it. I think that some of the skill sets that I have are something that anybody can get, yet it's like an apprenticeship to a degree. You know, there's probably a good 4 or 5 years of work involved to get that skill base up. I think everybody likes the dream of, I'm going to quit my job and be a property developer full-time tomorrow. I'm going to be pessimistic and say that I don't actually believe it's that easy. I think that not only a market's different state to state, you know, that builders and the types of products you build, the profitable side of it, the outcomes are going to be different every suburb you go to. So there's a lot of detail to know, and I don't think that it's something that I would encourage someone to just chuck their job in and do full-time tomorrow. Yet if they had the right amount of determination and the right amount of patience, it is something that everybody can do in time.
Development, Marty, as a concept, tell me, what does it mean to you?
Development to me means to create real estate, in this instance, that creates a better financial return than what was obviously there. But I think it's more about it's a bit like art. It's a bit like a painting. I don't think an artist would ever paint the same painting twice, and I don't think with developing you tend to do the same thing twice either. I think that the skill set is a mixture of both flair, as in artistic type flair, and then specific target market of meeting market needs. So I think developing overall, to summarise it, would be more about creating an opportunity that is also going to be profitable, because it's very easy to go and build anything. I mean, you can buy a block of land and build anything you want on it within regulations, but whether or not that's actually going to be profitable is another thing. So to be able to try and combine that so that you end up with a result of money in the bank at the end of the day is where the skills come in.
Martin Ayles, we were in the car and we were driving around and we saw that this was for sale.
We did.
And I want to convince you to buy this and do it as a case study together to teach these people in iClub exactly how to put a development deal together. Tell us why we would or wouldn't.
Okay, Steve, I can't tell you too many reasons why we wouldn't develop this. What I can tell you is, and I said this earlier in the car, is that I can't actually believe that this property is still on the market. And through the boom and through the last few years, these would have been snapped up, they would have had multiple offers put on them, and they would have sold for perhaps even over the asking price, which wasn't uncommon, particularly as you've seen today in this area where there's a lot of development and there's a mix of new homes and these old fibro homes. The thing that I like about this block, you'll see it's perfectly rectangular, which is on this little green picture here on the sign, and it's 905 square metres. I pretty much know off the top of my head that I can get 3 allotments on that, 3 dwellings I should say. So there's a lot of reasons to build on this site. It's a high side of the road, which we know we like, and it's a nice street, it's tree lined, it's well presented. I think there's a lot of reasons to do this.
All right, one of the things I've just noticed, Marty, is the setback at the front here. There's quite a lot of land, which is really dead land.
Yep.
Is that going to be a problem?
No, not at all, because the setback's going to be determined by the houses either side, and you can see the houses next door here are a fair way forward. So now, as a rule of thumb, it's roughly 5.5 to about 6 metres.
I'm trying to think, Marty, what are some things that would kill this? Would say, if we went and did some more due diligence, we'd say, oh, no, don't worry about it, too hard.
Yeah, and I mean, until you do your due diligence, you never know. I think what would perhaps catch you out here would be building a product in this area where you've got a lot of competition for sales. One thing I can tell you just from local area knowledge is that there's a lot of 3-bedroom homes on the market here. We need to be in that affordable bracket. Times are a bit tough, as we know. And one thing that I'm finding that's working quite well now is more of the senior living type stuff. So looking perhaps down the path of doing some stuff for aged care.
All right, very good. Well, let's ring up Graham and see what he wants for it, hey? See if we can make the numbers work, and we'll do Marty Ayles' famous back of the envelope.
There we go.
Marty, we've taken a look at that house that we may be interested in buying in Sturt.
Yep.
The one that is just the rectangular 900 odd square metres. I'd love to gain the perspective of watching you put together some really rough numbers as a very, very first cut due diligence of how the profit might look. Obviously needs a lot more further work. But I think people watching this would really benefit seeing just how you put together some numbers down on a bit of paper. Would you mind doing that?
Sure.
All right, well, let's start.
Okay, so a couple of key points that I would just want to educate the people here on is most people overcomplicate developing from a numbers perspective. They're looking for a fancy spreadsheet, they're looking for a bunch of data that they can input, and really what it comes back to is how much money we're going to put into this deal and what are we going to get out of it. And another way to describe that is your famous how much down, how much back, how much time, how much risk. So one of those two equations are really all you need to know. And I've never really, no matter how big the deal, I've never diverted away from those theories. So we're going to obviously look at the expenses because that's fundamentally what's important here. So we're going to say that that site was on the market for $380,000, right? Now we've rung the agent, we know that's what it's available for, but we're going to go in and go say cash unconditional today because we've got the ability to do that given the low cost of the property, okay? We can pay, say, a decent deposit, go subject to finance perhaps might be the end of it. So let's say we bought that property for $355,000, okay? So we've got here $355,000. So we're going to call this sheet our outgoing sheet, okay? So we bought the property for $355,000, right? So we're going to call that purchase price, okay? And then here we've got some stamp duty that we have to pay. Now we know that we pay that in every state and it's roughly give or take, but pretty much most of the time works out to around 5%. Okay, so on this property here, we're going to say that that's about $18,000 in stamp duty. Okay, then we're going to have to knock it over. At some point, we're going to have to do demolition. Now, we know there's probably a bit of asbestos. Now, for the sake of the education, I know that that's roughly about $12,000 on that property. Okay, all right, to get rid of that. And that'll give us what's called a clear site. Okay, now, what I like to do, Steve, in all my developments is factor in what we call the other program. Now, other is other costs that we've forgotten about or unexpected: sewer extensions, power line shifting, power pole shifting, and anything, getting rid of a driveway, putting a new one in, things like that. So a crossover. So we're going to factor in $20,000 for what I just always call other. And for as long as I've been developing, I've always ended up spending that somewhere. So I think it's a must. Okay. Now, we also know that we've got to do a land division. Okay. Now, in this instance, if we were to build 3 properties, we're going to end up with a community title, which is a little cheaper than a Torrens title, or a green title in some states they call it. So we're going to have about $20,000 worth of subdivision, right? So I'll just call that subs, right? Now we have to construct the 3 homes. Now, we know that our meterage rate is approximately $1,150 a square metre for construction. Okay. So we're going to build 3 homes. This dwelling that you're in today, as you can see, it's a moderate home. It's 2 bedroom. Okay, these are just on 100 square metres, these homes. So if we worked on, say, a build cost of $150,000 to be conservative today. Yep. Okay, so we're going to build 3 homes at, say, $450,000 build costs. Okay, that's going to include builder's margin, you know, something that most people can affordably build. 8-foot ceiling, standard windows and doors, standard fit out. Okay. Then we're going to have to pay a real estate agent to sell them. Okay, now they're roughly around 2% plus or minus GST as well. So, you know, let's call it 2.2%. So we know our rough retail price is probably going to be around that, just under that $400,000, $350,000 mark. So we're going to be up for about 20, let's just say 25 with marketing, right? So we've got about $25,000 in agents costs. Okay. Now, I think we've pretty much covered off most of our outgoings, right? So let's just add those up and see what we come up with. It comes to $900,000 of money that we've got to hand out of our pocket or out of the bank's pocket. What's the one thing we've forgotten to add in here? I just gave you a hint. We've got to pay the bank some interest, don't we?
Very good.
Now, how long is this development going to take?
2 years.
2 years. Wow, who's your builder?
Well, from buy to sell, I'm allowing 2 years.
Okay. Now, we know that at the time we buy this, we have interest on the purchase, or 80% of the purchase, but we don't necessarily have interest on the build cost, right? So we've got to try and atomise that interest out over that period of 2 years or 18 months where we don't have interest at the start, but we might have high interest holding at the end, okay? Right. So let's just say that our interest costs on this development were, say, $45,000.
Okay.
Okay, in bank interest. Right. Now, bank fees are fairly nominal on a development like this. You wouldn't pay very much. You would pay perhaps $500 for some bank fees.
Pardon me.
Okay. So we've got a total of $945,000 that's gone out. Okay. Right. Now, we got some GST we can claim back along the way, but then we're going to have to pay GST when we sell. But let's look at our sales now, because what matters is what we're going to earn. Okay. Yep. So if we've got 3 properties that we can sell, let's say we retail these market. We spoke to a gentleman in the street today, and he said that prices he felt had come back a bit. And those 3 across the road, the guy that came and introduced himself to you, and he was saying that they'd sold for $375. Now, let's just say in this instance they were 2-bedders. Maybe we have 1 3-bedder on the site. Let's do a breakdown here of our sale prices. So now we've got what's called ingoing, right? So we've got money coming in, right? We've got 3 dwellings that we're going to sell. Yep. Let's say we've got $349,000, which we know in that area is pretty fair, right? Let's say we got $345,000. We gave one away a bit cheaper, right? That was the last one to sell, let's say. And then for the 3-bedder, let's say we got $365,000, which we also know is pretty achievable, right? And now I know from experience, having developed a lot in that area, that that's quite a low figure, okay? But for the sake of the exercise, I like to be a little conservative, right? What's our total income there?
Well, if we said 350 and 350 is 700 minus 1 and 5 is 6, so that's 694. Yep. 694 and 365. is 6 and 3 is 9. One.
Is it 1050? 1059.
Oh, geez, mate, you've got the accountant in me.
I reckon it's 1059, just quietly.
9, carry the 1, 10, 14, 15. Yep. 1,059,000.
Cool. And what were our outgoings?
Well, you're going to make me do some work now, are you?
Yeah.
Minus 945.
Yep.
And we've got some GST we're going to have to pay on a net basis.
Well, yeah, but forget about that. Just let's look at our gross margin. What's our gross margin in the bank?
104,000.
No, no, not quite. 114.
114, thanks. Spot the ex-accountant.
Right. So we've got $114,000 there that's gone back into the bank as a profit.
Yep.
Okay. Pre-tax. Cool. So therefore, on that development, now I can also tell you that normally this sort of deal, we try and push that out in around 12 months from start to finish.
Yep.
Okay, the council's fairly obliging in this area. So you might see a reduction in this, okay, in your interest, and you may see a slight reduction in perhaps your building costs, but we've been fairly conservative.
All right, so when I look at this, Marty, I think, right, so if that's the middle price, what would be a low price? Like if everything went pear-shaped,
yep.
There's enough fat in this to sell these at a 10% discount.
And I know someone who's just done that not that long ago. Okay, now this might go for $330 and this might go for $330 and this might go for $350.
Yep.
So you'll see a reduction there of, you know, perhaps $40,000, $45,000,
right,
which should come off here. So you'd still walk away with, say, a $65,000 or $75,000 profit.
So one of the things that you could do is add 10% to your build cost and take 10% from your sales price and just see how it works out in a worst case scenario on the two big variables.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we go ahead and do this? Is there not enough profit to make it worthwhile, or?
Look, some developers work on percentage margins, so they want to see this figure here represent somewhere between 15 to 20% of their total costs. I personally, for as long as I've been in Adelaide, I don't think that's been overly obtainable for standard residential developing. There's other types of developments you can, but usually with greater reward comes greater risk. So if you want to see that, you could almost say that's pretty close to 11% return,
yep,
okay, of your gross income. Okay, I think that the thing that we're trying to teach here is what's not so important is this figure. What's quite critical is this figure here, is that we've got enough room to move on these sale prices as an exit strategy, perhaps in a declining market. Or we've also got to factor that what if interest rates were to go up, even though at the moment they're on their way down.
Someone once said to me, you bank dollars, not percentages.
This is true. Martin Ayles, I believe.
Martin Ayles. GST, mate?
Yeah, look, GST's worked on a little different. It's not 10% of your profit. That's a bit of an illusion for most people.
Yep.
So it's obviously everyone's going to have to seek their own advice because there's other factors that come into that.
Yep.
But the GST is calculated using a method that involves the purchase price of the land and deducting that off first. So it's done a little fairly complicated. But if you were to say as a rule of thumb that it was in this case 10%, which it won't be, to be under that, then you would say, well, you're up for $11,400 odd in GST.
I've heard you talk about the different P's and the different R's when it comes to real estate investing and property development in particular. Do you want to run us through what they might be?
Yeah, one of the things I've had to do over the years through some of the, I suppose, education programs that we've run with yourself and a couple of other people is we've had to try and summarise my learning lessons into teachable formats. And some of those formats have come naturally and some of them we've had to manufacture. One of the ones that I like to teach is the 4 R's of real estate, which is there's basically fundamentally only 4 things you can do, which is rent, reside, renovate and redevelop. And they're the 4 R's. And then we talk about the P's of real estate and what's important, and we use them at one of my seminars going back a few years, was that you have to have the 5 P's right, which was product, price, position, the promotion and the presentation. And so they, you know, fairly general marketing terms, I know, but they actually, each one of those involve quite a lot of complexities and they're all important within their own right.
Marty, what do you see that's special about this property?
Well, Steve, there's a few things from a development perspective. What we're looking at here is the high side of the road, so you'll notice that this block gradually runs uphill, which one of the bonuses for that is winter, keeping the water off the site. It's very easy to get our stormwater away from the site, and there's not going to be too much retaining There won't be too much earthworks, too significant, so it won't increase our development costs overall. The size of the block, obviously, is 932 square metres. So I know within this council zone that we can actually fit 3 properties as a minimum, maybe at a squeeze 4. And they'd be about 120, 115, 130 square metre homes, including garage, perhaps 2-bedroom in this instance, and they'd be quite an attractive, marketable product for this suburb.
The house, Marty, has it seen better years?
Yeah, look, Steve, this area is full of these homes. They were built through the 60s and perhaps some of them early 70s, what we commonly call a fibro home. A lot of them are elevated up off the ground on the old stump and bearer type system. Most of them are asbestos, so these are perfect opportunities for knockover. Typical 1970s family home with a great big backyard and plenty of room for the kids to play, but times have changed.
Marty, asbestos, you wouldn't go anywhere near it, would you?
Oh, look, don't be scared by asbestos, Steve. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. So your cost in demolition might increase by $3,000 or something, but overall, over the whole project, it's not a significant factor anymore.
Is this the sort of property that would be hard to go wrong with?
Well, at the end of the day, I always say there's one thing that goes right with developing, and there's a million things that can go wrong. The one thing that goes right fundamentally is most people are doing it to try and obtain a financial gain or profit. That's the thing that goes right, and then everything else usually can detract from that. So if you were going to make, say, $100,000 gross out of this project, every time there's an error or a misjudgment or a miscalculation or something goes wrong, then it usually detracts from your profit. So this property here on the surface, just looking at it, is, I believe that you and I did see this property a few weeks ago, and we looked at it on the internet, we spoke to the agent and we rang up and inquired, and the asking price of this was quite attractive. So overall, this deal probably quite profitable.
If you could nominate one thing that might actually go wrong with this one, what would it be?
Okay, in this current market, one of the things that you would want to do here is make sure you got your product really correct. And what I mean by product is we're talking about the floor plan and obviously the pricing. So you wouldn't want to over-capitalise. We're in what I'd call say a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in as far as maybe 6 out of 10 in socio-economics. And what I mean by that is demographically this area is not highly affluent, and it's certainly not bottom of the scale. So over-capitalising here wouldn't be in your best interest. So what I mean by that from a development perspective is you wouldn't build something with 9-foot ceilings, frameless shower screens, the best quality carpets, woolen carpets and things like that. You're not going to see a return on that like you would say in your inner city suburbs.
There you go, folks. A couple of things we're learning already. Make sure that you match your development with the socio-demographic profile of the person who's going to live in it. Over-capitalising, Marty, that'd be one of the cancers on property development profits, wouldn't it?
It is, and I think what people don't understand is that over-capitalising is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is not realising what they can sell something for. So whilst both of them fundamentally produce the same result in the fact that you don't make money, over-capitalising, does that mean you've paid too much for the site, or does that mean you spent too much on the development? So, and does it mean that your product can't sell for the high enough price? So a lot of people sit down and go, well, I want to make $100,000, so therefore my sale price must be X. But what you think a property should sell for doesn't necessarily determine what the market's going to pay for the property. So therefore you have to have all 3 of those factors right.
Well, that brings us to an end of part 1 of the special interview that I did with Martin Ayles. Stay tuned, and next month we'll look into part 2. Bye-bye for now.